Hi Polaris. I have just finished rereading your description to me about the experiences that you had starting when you were 17, and then the sort of continuation of seeing things and more unique experiences over the many years that followed that. So let's see if we can make some sense from it and see if perhaps there is some information about how your experiences and what you observed, especially around that time that Dr. Ron Paul, who I'm also a fan of, and his son, was running for president, and then things seemed to change. Let's see if we can tie in what happened to you into that. I don't know if we will, but let's see what's there. Greetings, and thank you for what is the greatest challenge so far in the record of channeling that this channel has done. We appreciate the challenge, and it is with challenges like these that the channel will become more adept at being of service to those that come to seek some information regarding the events of their own lives. So, let us begin in this way. Pam, you have been the subject of a protocol of visitation since you were young. You did not first become aware of it until you were an advanced teenager in years. However, if you were to experiment with a type of hypnosis which would trace you back chronologically through the experiences of your life, it is quite possible that you would discover you have hidden memories of being in close proximity to beings from extraterrestrial origin from a young age. While this sounds like a very unique experience, there are actually very many humans alive today who have been part of this protocol. This protocol has many functions. One of the functions is purely scientific, to study and observe the human species as it goes through its own evolution. And this has been ongoing for a very, very long time, predating modern history. And in particular, it is often the methodology to follow bloodlines generationally, where the single lineage will be continued to be visited and observed to collect a more specific type of data. And this data is interesting from the perspective of anthropology to better understand the origins of those beings who observe you, and also to record data on this solar system experiment, and in particular the Earth human experiment that is occurring right now, because it is an experimental environment where the beings of your solar system have been born into a state of spiritual dichotomy with no recognition of their connection to the One, so that there can be this traversing through the gauntlet of darkness to the final epiphanic realization, demarking the end of time in third density, transitioning into fourth density, that you are indeed connected to the One and always have been. If this experiment proves to be successful, and it is the fourth iteration which occurs now on planet Earth, first being Venus, next being Saturn, next being Mars, this time Earth, and then the next cell shall be most likely Uranus. If this experiment proves to be successful, and the final outcome gauging success will be that the species of the solar system that have passed through the gauntlet of darkness and arriving at the place of epiphanic realization that they are eternally connected to the One, will choose a philosophical path of service to others. And if this is proven to be so, which we believe it shall be, then there is the potential that this could become the default mechanism of birthing new species into creation. And if this is the case, then it is the extrapolated understanding that all new beings, all new species would eventually, once they transition to the place of transition into a higher density state with recognition of their connection to the One, would also choose a service to others philosophy. And therefore the service to self philosophical choice would be less chosen, and eventually perhaps would no longer become part of the physical paradigm of the universe. This is not an eradication of that philosophy, but really it is an opportunity to express the greater experiential understanding the One has of itself in the physical realm. So, the contribution to the experience of the One that arises from the service to self philosophical path has, in a sense, been completed. Its contribution has reached a sense of totality, and there is more benefit to be received by the One if its experience going forward from this place of evolution on a universal context is service to others. And so the experiment occurring now is to see if there could be a way that the service to others philosophical path becomes the default mechanism, the default choice for all new species birthed into creation. So for you specifically, Pam, you had been in this protocol of frequent visitation from when you were young, beginning, we would say, beginning when you were between the ages of 3 to 5. This visitation process began. And it wasn't until you were 17 that it was decided to start a regiment of bringing some conscious awareness of your relationship and integration into this program. Always when these programs reach a level of beginning conscious awareness in the subject, it always will begin with allowing the subject to have an experience where they observe the craft or the presence of those that wish to be observed as part of this process, and then gauging the reaction of the test subject, although we don't like to use the word test subject because it sounds very clinical. It sounds, in the context of the human experience, like a lab rat or like an animal that is experimented on. But it is not this type of relationship at all. The relationship is very loving, it is very benevolent, and it is in a way, a contribution and a nurturing of this experiment so it may reach a fulfillment which is of the greatest benefit to the human experience and also to the entirety of the all, through the great wisdom and understanding that will be absorbed into the all through what occurs within the solar system here. So, after the first experience of conscious awareness, there is a gauging of the response and what was the emotionality of the test subject following the experience. And then based on that emotional experience, then there is a recalibration to decide on when the next visitation will be and how frequent, how blatant it will be. For you, given your levels of anxiety over that particular experience, it was decided to allow you to incorporate that, to come to a place where when you were to contemplate the experience, the feelings, the emotionality of anxiety and of fear were dissipated, and instead what was predominant was a pondering, a wonder about what had occurred, and a desire in a way that there could be another similar experience. Once you had reached this place where what we had just described was your state, then there was the beginning of more frequent conscious experiences with those that have been following you and know you very well. During these times, when you had this period leading up until the moment you noticed that you began having these experiences much less, during this time where you had the occasional conscious experience, you were also being visited in a more frequent capacity, because when there is greater conscious awareness, when you are having the experience of being aware that there is something that appears to be observing you, then in the visitation experiences, you are conscious of the observations that you have been making, and so the visitation experience is also less confrontational, and you are permitted to be more conscious in the actual visitation experience, such that you are allowed to communicate and even form relationships with those that are visiting you. However, the protocol is that when the visitation is completed, that you are returned to a state of non-remembrance. And then when you continue the days of your life and you have more conscious awareness type of experiences where you can see lights or you have a sense that there is something there, then when again you have a visitation experience, in those visitation experiences you can ask, you can speak about those experiences, because you are given this opportunity to be more conscious in the visitation experience, because you have demonstrated that you can have these conscious experiences without the sense of terror, without the sense of fear. And then at the end of these visitation experiences, where you have the opportunity to ask questions, you are again returned to a state of non-remembrance. And this is the protocol. This is how it is done by agreement across the entire globe for all visitation experiences, except for the few rare experiences where something goes wrong and the visited test subjects are erroneously allowed to retain their memory, or in some special occasions there are beings which have incarnated as Earth humans that have close relationships with the beings that are being visited by, and so they are permitted to retain their memories, because in very near incarnations they were literally those beings that they are visited by, meaning that they are from the same race of the beings they are visited by. You are still on the radar, and there is still data that can be collected from you. And so if you were to desire to continue to have visitation experiences, this is something that you can ask for. And if you were to become into a meditative state and then allow yourself to go deeply into meditation and contemplate these conscious experiences that you've had in the past, and then from these conscious experiences you've had in the past, allow that vibration, that energetic harmonic which is intrinsic to the beings that have visited you, allow that vibration to find the familiar vibration within the memories of yourself, within your Akashic records, in a sense. And you will be able to find the memories of these visitation experiences you've had before. And there is a chance that you could fully remember or partially remember these experiences, but even so, it is not necessary to have a clarified memory of these visitation experiences, because instead what you can do is have a memory of the frequency, of the vibration, of the energetic signature, without necessarily having a memory of the literal moments that occurred. By having a memory of the energetic signature, what you can do is you can hold that energetic signature during a deep meditation, and then that becomes the carrier signal broadcasting from you, which for them is a very conspicuous signal. It is something that they will detect, and then in this frequency, which becomes the carrier wave, you can embed an intent. And so, if you would like for these experiences to recommence, then you can literally ask them using this technique. And then it will be up to those that receive the message to decide if they would reciprocate and become more open and more frequent in their visitations with you. It is not only humans that are visited. Of course, this is a biosphere. The Earth is a complete organism, as the solar system is a complete organism, and the galaxy is a complete organism, until eventually, to the ultimate extrapolation, the One is a complete organism. So when those beings come here to observe the Earth, of high interest is, of course, the Earth human, because the Earth human is the apex sentience on this planet. And eventually, when they become awakened to the unity as the humanity being and also incorporated into the Earth being, then they will become the sentience of the Earth. Therefore, there is a high interest of the Earth human species within the context of the biosphere. However, also of interest are the many life forms other than Earth humans on planet Earth, which includes many animals, fish, insects, plants, and so on. Everything is of interest. And so there are many animals and plants and all varieties of the biosphere that have also had visitation experiences. And so for the animals that you find that have followed you in the past from the air or have come and howled outside your window, they have come to you because they have a recognition, because you have been in the proximity frequently throughout your life with these beings that have included you in their visitation protocol, then incorporated into your energetic signature is a frequency which is descriptive of these beings that you have had the experiences with. And these animals also, having had a similar experience, are integrated into this same energetic quality. And being more innate and less cerebral, the animals operate more on an energy basis. And just as they can smell and see with great capacity, also they can sense energy with great capacity. As you see when there is a dog which will bark at one particular person, but they're being very friendly to another particular person, yet having no evidence other than being in their presence for a few moments, because they are operating on the basis of energy detection. These animals that have followed you have had these similar visitation experiences, and they can sense in you this familiar but yet very unique energy. And so when they are in the natural environment, you shine like a beacon, because there are very few examples in the environment of this energetic quality which they have the familiarity with. And so they investigate. They are curious. They wonder what it is. And for them, the net experience of the visitation has been a pleasant one, has been an elevation of their energetic state. And they do not have the mentality which can create the fantasy of a unpleasant experience or the fear of something nefarious and dastardly has occurred. For them it is purely, not entirely purely, but very largely in a proportional sense, on the basis of energy. And the beings that they were with have a very pleasant and elevated energy. And so they seek to be in the vicinity of that more so, because it is pleasant. Therefore, they discover you, they seek you out. The energetic imprint that you receive from these visitation experiences is an artifact with a half-life in a sense. So the vibration that you have integrated into yourself from these encounters will dissipate over time. And so you will find that you will have these animal experiences less so. Also, you will be less of a blip on the radar of those beings that are including you in their visitation protocol. Part of the protocol is they start with a large pool of data. So there will be many subjects within the initial exploratory stages of this protocol. And then over time, they will become more selective in who they continue to revisit. And the continuation of this revisiting protocol will, to some extent, be based on how well the test subjects continue to maintain that vibration. And the reason they do this is because if a being is able to maintain that vibration at a higher saturation than perhaps others, then this is indicative that these test subjects are more, what word shall we use here, perhaps more awakened or more elevated in their basal vibration, although this is not a judgment in any way. And so to work with them will yield greater results because of this propensity they have to vibrate at a higher frequency. And ultimately, vibrating a high frequency is the final outcome of the third density experience, to transition into fourth density, where you literally are vibrating at a fourth density frequency, which is much higher than the third density experience. And so if you demonstrate this propensity, then you are of greater interest because the data collected is of greater relevance, because you represent the prototype or the model that will successfully complete this transition into fourth density. So over time, as your vibration becomes less of the quality of those that have visited you, then you become a less of a blip on the radar. However, you can reappear on their radar with a greater relevance if you do this practice which we suggested, which is to reconnect with that vibration, and then see if you can connect to the vibration of the visitation experiences that you've had through this earlier part of your life, and then resonate with it and include in the carrier frequency your intent. And you can become re-included in this more frequent visitation protocol, because even now you are still from time to time revisited if they wish to collect data for a comparative sampling of those that have remained more frequently visited in this protocol and those who have become less frequently visited, to take data from both and then do some kind of comparative analysis. But of course, this is entirely up to you. There is no requirement and there is no failure. There is no anything other than the continuation of the experiment which began long before your current incarnation, and will continue in a less scientific way, but in more of a ambassadorial and colleague way in the future. Now we'll speak in the context of this period from 2012, when there seemed to be a change in the dynamic and also this burgeoning energy. Leading up until 2012, there had been a form of quarantine where there was the nurturing of the experiment in the Earth-human field to get it to a point where it could be allowed to continue forward on its own momentum, rather than requiring the energetic assistance, in a sense, of those that are the caretakers and the progenitors of the experiment. So this stabilizing effect of those that are caretakers and progenitors of the experiment was to provide a counterbalance to the influence of the opportunists that infiltrated the experiment when they had their chance in the past. However, the experiment does not make sense if it can only achieve fruition through the babying required from all of those who are observers, progenitors, curators, caretakers of the experiment. This defeats the purpose, because it is then not an organic expression of the light in a new paradigm. Instead, it is a conspired event. And on a cosmic basis, it would be untenable that every single new species birthing into creation required that level of attendance such that it can reach fruition. So, it is essential that at some point the experiment is allowed to be given its own organic path so that it can reach fruition in a way which doesn't require this continuous nursery type environment. So then there is a greater scientific validation in extrapolating that this could be a default mechanism for the birthing of new species into creation. So, around this period of 2012, and this period of 2012 is significant in the Earth-human culture, particularly originating from the Mayans, because it was known that this was going to be the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new cycle. And the end of the cycle was the end of the quarantine, was the end of this nursery type environment. And so those that are parasitically affecting the experiment, they are aware of this. They knew it was coming and they were aware of this moment arriving. And so for them, it was important that the moment the experiment became organic, that they immediately imprint their values and their vision as firmly as they could, such that the momentum of the Earth human was directed as much as possible towards this vision that they have been working studiously towards for a long time. In a sense, it was when the game became real for them, because until then they had been corrupting the experiment with success, but there was limitations on the full extent of what they could do. However, there was now the opportunity to stamp their imprint much more firmly, because there was no longer this inhibition of the quarantining status, which they had contravened in every way they could, but there still was some limitation to what was possible for them. So, they had already begun gaining momentum leading up to this. So when they arrived at that end of quarantining, they already were hitting the ground running, for example. And this began in the beginning of this century. So in 2001, when there was the attack in New York City, and then the subsequent wars and reshaping of the demography of Europe, and the many wars that originated from these original establishment of that narrative, were leading up to hitting the ground running when this demarcation point was crossed. Because they knew once this organic threshold was crossed, then there was a very strong possibility that the pendulum of the human spirit was going to swing very forcefully into the light. And so as much as possible, they had to deter that. So when the threshold was crossed, they immediately became more overt in their strategy. And this continues until today. So if you observe the world today in the Earth human experience, you can see that it is in a state of very conspicuous and overt oppression, in a failing effort to prevent the swing of the pendulum of the Earth human energy into the light. However, it is of little long-term effect. While it does seem to be very oppressive and in some ways despairingly bad, what is occurring now, the manifestation which Earth humans are experiencing is a metaphoric feedback on an energy state which is not reflective of the moment. Because in the third density experience, there is a delay between the manifested experience and the energy which created that manifestation. So, the appearance of the moment is always a delayed feedback of the energy. And so the energy now, in this very moment, is much more of the quality of the light than the experience you currently find yourself in. And this has been of very little relevance over the timescape of humanity, because even though there was this delay, the energy of the moment was still very, very, very similar to the experience, because the energy of the moment was very, very similar to the energy of past moments. However, there has been reached a point now where the energy is becoming exponential. And so the energy of the moment is now starkly different to the energy of just very recently. And the energy of the moment is going to be very starkly different to the energy of a very near future moment. And the difference is going to be this continuous elevation in the density and the potency of the light, and a reduction in the saturation of the darkness. And this reduction in the saturation of the darkness will manifest as a crumbling, as a falling apart. And there will be a stage where there appears to be this dichotomous state, but only a dichotomous state specifically in the darkness. So, we mean it this way. There is a dichotomous bifurcation in the energetic field on Earth, where you have polarization to the dark, polarization to the light. However, the darkness itself will also begin to bifurcate in a sense, where there will become a mismatch between the verboseness, the charade of the darkness, and yet the observable impact of the darkness. So, the front men and women of darkness will be on the stage of the world, declaring their power and their authority and their right to diminish you and all other humans of their rights and liberties. Yet at the same time, there will be an obvious crumbling of the foundation on which they stand, until eventually all those in the Earth human experience will look on them and realize they are just empty, hollow, powerless words. And they stand on a foundation of nothing substantial, nothing which has the capacity to enact in a meaningful way any of these things which they say they are authoritated to do. And when this point is reached, this is when they will become, or they will be treated in a very dismissive sense. And they will be pushed to the side, and the rest of humanity will then get on with the business of being the beings of the light that create the world that they deserve. And they will be in the periphery, and they will continue to be yapping, in a sense, their dark tirades, but less and less and less and less will they be listened to, will they be given any relevance or any reverence, until eventually they will be nothing, and there will be a part of the human field which will be diverted to cleaning them up and to finding the secrets and the truths that they have hidden, and then exposing them to the world such that the world can be fully cleansed and detoxified of their presence, and then they will be summarily put through the process of justice, so that they are held accountable for all they have done, and then the legacy of the lesson learned from that can be incorporated into the human consciousness such that it is never repeated again in the future. And it will stand as a reminder of the brilliance of the earth human energy in contrast to its origins, of the gauntlet that it passed through to arrive at the place where it finds itself. And in this way, it will be like a trophy of accomplishment. So, Pam, we feel that we have answered your question to a little level of adequacy, which we hope that you will be pleased with. You are an interesting case, you are an interesting person, and we think that perhaps it could be enjoyable for you to do some introspective investigation about these experiences that you've had in the past, and see if you can access some of your memories which are deliberately turned off. But part of this protocol is a requirement of care. And so the memories are never completely extracted, but rather they are hidden. They are put behind a door, which is then closed and locked. But it is antithetical to the values and the ethos of those that you've had the visitations with to literally remove the memories forever. And so they allow them to remain there, and they shut off your access to them for the purpose that you are not traumatized, and also for the purpose that their protocol visitations can continue without them coming to your window and there is a trap set to ensnare them. However, over time, they are fully okay with the prospect that through your own investigation, through your own introspection and curiosity, that you find the door and unlock it and discover those memories. They are okay with that. Because generally, if you reach this point, then you are ready to know. So, this is perhaps a fun suggestion for something that you could do. We thank you also for your energetic contribution to the whole, for your holding of the light so that there can be the forming of the single flame as all humans come together to be the one being, the humanity being, the unity which will be the fifth dimension. Passing into fourth density, your fifth dimension will be unity. It will be identifying self as I am, but also I am the unity. This is your extra dimension. The dimension of self-identifying as the unity, as well as the self. And holding the light, being invested in a future, being invigorated by the sense of freedom. This is all contributory to this final outcome. And so for that, we thank you. we hope you enjoy, and during this session, those beings which have been in the visitation protocol with you have been incorporated into the group being which has been channeled here. So I think the channel himself has noticed that the quality of the voice, the intonation, and the pitch seems slightly different than usual, and this is because the group being which has been formed is a little different in its constituency, and that's because part of the group being has been formed with representatives from this visitation protocol that has been part of your life since you were young. In fact, two of the beings which have regularly been in the visitation crew, in your experiences, are in this channel now. And they wish to say to you that they have known you since you were a sweet young girl, and they have always liked you, and they've had many pleasant experiences interacting with you, and were always in a joyful state when they were answering your curiosity. And you were touching them and wanting to feel their head and wanting to touch their skin, and they permitted you to do so, and they enjoyed to be in the presence of your child-like love and curiosity and fearfulness. And finally, they wish to say that you are still firmly in their memory. That is not, they have not forgotten you, because it is not like the nameless lab rat that never has a name and is never remembered, but instead they feel a close relationship and a love for you. And they have an openness where they would be willing to re-establish this frequency of visitation with you, but of course they are not permitted to be wasteful in the way they use their scientific energies and time and resources. So they would only reincorporate you if you represented something which met the parameters of their protocol. And so then it is up to you to elevate your vibration and reharmonize with their energy, such that you then meet the parameters and can be reincorporated into their study. And there is the possibility that you would be allowed to have a conscious visitation and then retain a glimmer, is all they will say, a glimmer of a memory. And then from there, who knows? But in the beginning, they cannot promise more than that. Thank you from them, farewell from them until next time, and from us, the group which is normally here, we also thank you for this opportunity, and with much love, we say goodbye.